The autumn wind swept through the streets of Chicago, carrying fallen leaves across Marcus Johnson's worn sneakers as he set up his shoe-shining kit on the busy corner of State Street. At 12 years old, he had already mastered the art of picking the perfect spot, close enough to the financial district to catch business people, but not so close that the other shoe shiners would chase him away. Marcus carefully arranged his supplies: 3 different brushes, 2 types of polish, and the special cloth his mother had given him from her old cleaning supplies. His small wooden box, which served both as his workstation and a seat for customers, had been built by Mr. Peters from the hardware store. The old man had helped Marcus when he noticed the boy trying to make one from discarded wooden planks. The morning rush hour was beginning, and Marcus watched as people hurried past, their shoes clicking against the sidewalk. Some carried coffee cups, others talked on phones, but most just walked with their heads down, lost in their own worlds. Marcus had learned that timing was everything in this business. "Shoe shine, sir?" "Best shine in Chicago, only $5. He called out to a passing businessman whose brown leather shoes had clearly seen better days. The man walked past without even glancing at him, but Marcus wasn't discouraged. His mother always said persistence was the key to success. As he waited for his first customer, Marcus's mind wandered to his sister Lisa, lying in her hospital bed. At 8 years old, she was the bravest person he knew. Even when the doctors were poking her with needles or when she could barely breathe, she would still smile and tell them not to worry. But Marcus did worry, especially when he overheard his mother crying late at night, looking at medical bills she couldn't pay. His mother, Grace Johnson, worked as a nurse's aide at the local hospital, often taking double shifts to make ends meet. She didn't know about his shoe-shining business yet. Marcus had told her he was staying late at school for study group. He kept his earnings hidden in a shoebox under his bed, wrapped in an old sock. So far, he had saved $342.75, but Lisa's heart surgery would cost thousands more. "Hey kid, how much for a shine?" A voice interrupted his thoughts. Marcus looked up to see a woman in a navy blue suit, her black shoes dusty from the street. $5, ma'am. I'll make them look brand new," Marcus said, straightening his back and putting on his best professional smile. The woman sat on his box, and Marcus got to work. He had learned his technique from watching YouTube videos on his mother's old phone, practicing for hours on his own shoes until he got it right. First, he cleaned off the dust with his soft brush, then applied the polish in small circular motions. "You're pretty good at this," the woman commented, watching him work. "How long have you been shining shoes?" 2 months, ma'am," Marcus replied, focusing on getting an even shine. "I learned from my grandfather." That was a lie, but he had found that customers liked hearing personal stories. It made them more likely to leave a tip. As he worked, Marcus could hear Lisa's voice in his head, telling him about the fairy tales she loved to read. She would often say that in every story, the hero had to overcome challenges before reaching their happy ending. Marcus hoped their story would work out the same way. The woman gave him $7, a $2 tip, and went on her way with gleaming shoes. Marcus carefully tucked the money into his pocket, mentally adding it to his savings. Every dollar brought him closer to helping Lisa. By lunchtime, Marcus had served 4 more customers. His hands were starting to feel cold, but he couldn't afford to buy gloves yet. Everything he earned had to go toward Lisa's surgery fund. He pulled his thin jacket tighter around himself and ate the peanut butter sandwich he had packed for lunch. During quiet moments, Marcus would do his homework. His teachers had noticed his grades slipping lately, but he couldn't explain why he was so tired in class. His mother had always stressed the importance of education, saying it was their ticket to a better life. Marcus felt guilty about his falling grades, but Lisa's needs came first. The afternoon brought more customers, including an elderly man who praised Marcus's thoroughness and gave him a $10 tip. "You remind me of myself at your age," the man said. "Keep working hard, son." Marcus thanked him, fighting back tears. The man's kindness reminded him of his father, who had passed away 3 years ago in a construction accident. As the day wore on, Marcus's feet began to ache from standing, but he didn't complain. He thought about Lisa, who endured far worse pain every day. The doctors had said her heart condition was getting worse, and without surgery, she might not make it through the winter. The thought made Marcus work even harder, calling out to every person who passed by with less than perfect shoes. At 4 o'clock, Marcus packed up his supplies. He needed to get home before his mother's shift ended at 5. As he walked to the bus stop, he counted his earnings for the day, $42. Not his best day, but not his worst either. He would add it to his savings when he got home. The bus ride home took 30 minutes, during which Marcus tried to stay awake by reviewing his math homework. Numbers danced before his tired eyes, but he forced himself to focus. His mother had always told him that education was something no one could take away from you. At home, Marcus hurried to hide his shoe-shining kit in the basement before heading upstairs to their small apartment. He quickly changed out of his work clothes and started his homework at the kitchen table, just as he did every day. When his mother came home at 5:30, exhausted from her shift, she would find him there, apparently having spent the afternoon studying. While working on his social studies assignment, Marcus heard their neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez's television through the thin walls. A commercial was playing about a local hospital's cardiac unit. His hands tightened around his pencil as he thought about Lisa in her hospital room, probably watching similar commercials on the small TV mounted on the wall. The sound of keys in the door made Marcus sit up straighter. His mother walked in, still in her blue nurse's ag uniform, her face showing the weariness of another long day. "Hi, honey," she said, giving him a tired smile. "Have you been studying all afternoon?" "Yes, Mom," Marcus replied, the lie tasting bitter in his mouth. "How's Lisa?" Grace set down her purse and sat heavily in the chair across from him. "She's hanging in there. The doctors say," she paused, swallowing hard. "They say we need to schedule the surgery soon. I'm going to try to get another loan tomorrow." Marcus nodded, thinking of the money hidden under his bed. It wasn't nearly enough yet, but he was trying. "Everything will be okay, Mom," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "You're such a good boy, Marcus," she said, squeezing back. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Later that night, after his mother had gone to bed, Marcus carefully counted his total savings again. $384.75 now. He knew it was barely a dent in the total they needed, but he refused to give up. Tomorrow would be another day of shining shoes, another day of saving money, another day of hope. As he lay in bed, Marcus could hear his mother's quiet sobs through the wall. He pulled his pillow over his head, but couldn't block out the sound or the worry that came with it. He thought about Lisa, probably lying awake in her hospital bed, maybe reading one of her fairy tales. In those stories, help always came when things seemed darkest. Marcus closed his eyes and prayed, something he hadn't done much since his father died. "Please," he whispered into the darkness, "please let me find a way to help Lisa." He didn't know then that help would come, but not in any way he could have imagined. For now, he drifted off to sleep, dreaming of shining shoes and saving his sister, $1 at a time. Rain poured down on Chicago's busy streets, but Marcus Johnson remained at his usual corner, protected only by a small blue tarp he had found in their building's basement. Most shoe shiners had packed up and gone home, but Marcus couldn't afford to lose a day's earnings. His sister Lisa's surgery wasn't going to pay for itself. Water dripped from the edge of his makeshift shelter as he watched expensive shoes splash through puddles. The weather had actually worked in his favor. More people needed their shoes cleaned after walking through the wet streets. His own clothes were damp, but he ignored his discomfort, focusing instead on calling out to potential customers. "Shoe shine. Get your shoes cleaned and dried, only $5. His voice was starting to get hoarse from competing with the rain, but he kept trying. Each person who passed was another chance to help Lisa. Around 3 o'clock, when the rain was coming down hardest, a tall man in an expensive gray coat stopped at Marcus's corner. His black leather shoes were splattered with mud from the street. The man looked at Marcus's setup, then at Marcus himself, studying him with curious eyes. "You're the only shoe shiner I've seen out in this weather," the man said, stepping under Marcus's tarp. "Pretty determined, aren't you?" Marcus nodded, already reaching for his cleaning supplies. "Yes, sir. Would you like a shine? I'll get those shoes looking perfect again." The man smiled and sat on the wooden box. "I'm Charles Bennett," he said, watching as Marcus began cleaning the mud off his shoes. "What's your name?" "Marcus Johnson, sir," Marcus replied, working carefully on the expensive leather. He could tell these shoes cost more than all his savings combined. Bennett leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Marcus, why are you out here in this weather when everyone else has gone home?" Marcus hesitated. He usually avoided telling customers too much about himself, but something about Bennett's kind eyes made him want to talk. Every day counts, sir. I can't afford to miss any chances to earn money. Most kids your age would be at home playing video games or watching TV, Bennett observed. What makes you different? Marcus focused on applying polish to Bennett's left shoe, buying time to decide how much to share. My sister, he finally said, his voice quiet, she's sick, in the hospital. Bennett was silent for a moment, watching Marcus work. That must be hard, he said gently. How old is your sister? Lisa's 8, Marcus replied, moving to the right shoe. She needs heart surgery, but he stopped, realizing he might be saying too much. Your shoes are almost done, sir. But Bennett didn't seem to be thinking about his shoes anymore. Heart surgery? That's serious. Are your parents able to help? Marcus's hands slowed for a moment. It's just my mom and us now. She works at the hospital as a nurse's aide, but, he shrugged, trying to seem casual even as his throat tightened. Insurance won't cover all of it. So you're out here trying to help, Bennett said. It wasn't a question. How long have you been doing this? About 2 months now, Marcus answered, starting the final buffing. I've saved almost $400. He didn't know why he was telling this stranger so much, but something about Bennett made him feel safe. Bennett watched as Marcus finished the shoes, making them shine despite the gloomy weather. Excellent work, he said, standing up. He reached into his wallet and pulled out several bills. Here's for the shine, plus a little extra for working in this weather. Marcus's eyes widened as Bennett handed him $50. Sir, I can't accept this much, he protested, but Bennett shook his head. You've earned it, Bennett said firmly. Not just for the shoes, but for your dedication. Not many people would work this hard to help their family. Marcus carefully tucked the money away, his hands shaking slightly. Thank you, sir. This means a lot. Bennett pulled out a business card and handed it to Marcus. I'd like to get my shoes shined again. Will you be here tomorrow? Yes, sir. Marcus nodded eagerly. Every day after school until 5. Good, Bennett smiled. I'll see you tomorrow then, and Marcus, stay dry if you can. As Bennett walked away, Marcus looked at the business card. Charles Bennett, CEO, Bennett Technologies. He'd never heard of the company, but the card was thick and fancy, with gold lettering. He carefully put it in his pocket, making sure it wouldn't get wet. The rain continued to fall, but Marcus felt warmer somehow. He served a few more customers that afternoon, but his mind kept going back to his conversation with Bennett. No one had ever shown such interest in his story before. When he got home that evening, Marcus did something he'd never done before. He looked up Charles Bennett on his mother's old phone. His eyes grew wide as he read article after article. Bennett Technologies was a major tech company, and Charles Bennett was worth billions, not millions. He had started from nothing, building his company from the ground up. Marcus could hardly sleep that night, wondering if Bennett would really come back the next day. Part of him worried that the whole thing had been a dream, that he'd imagined the kind man with the expensive shoes who had taken an interest in his story. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Marcus went through his school day in a daze, barely hearing his teachers as he thought about his afternoon appointment. What if Bennett came back? What if he didn't? As soon as the final bell rang, Marcus rushed to his corner. He spent extra time setting up his supplies, making sure everything was perfect. Then he waited, shining shoes for his regular customers while keeping one eye on the street. At exactly 3 o'clock, Charles Bennett appeared again. This time he wasn't alone. A woman in a smart business suit walked beside him, carrying a tablet computer. Hello, Marcus, Bennett said warmly. I hope you don't mind, but I brought my assistant, Ms. Carter, with me today. Would you mind if we asked you a few questions while you work on my shoes? Marcus nodded, his heart beating faster. Of course not, sir. As he began working on Bennett's shoes, Ms. Carter asked him about Lisa, her condition, her doctors, the hospital where she was staying. Marcus answered everything truthfully, surprised by how much he remembered from listening to his mother talk with the medical staff. And your mother, Bennett said carefully, she doesn't know you're doing this. Marcus shook his head. She works so hard already. I don't want her to worry about me too. Bennett and Ms. Carter exchanged a look that Marcus couldn't quite understand. When he finished the shoes, Bennett again paid him much more than the asking price. Marcus, Bennett said before leaving, Would it be possible to meet your mother sometime? I think I might be able to help. Marcus felt hope surge in his chest, but he tried to keep his voice steady. She works until 5 at Chicago General, but she's off on Sundays. Perfect. Bennett smiled. How about this Sunday afternoon? We could come to your home, if that's okay. Marcus gave them his address, his hands trembling slightly as he wrote it down. After they left, he sat on his wooden box for a long moment, tears filling his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, Lisa's fairy tales were right. Maybe help did come when you needed it most. That evening, Marcus added the day's earnings to his savings box, but for the first time in 2 months, he felt something more valuable than money. He felt hope. As he lay in bed that night, listening to the city sounds outside his window, Marcus smiled. Sunday couldn't come soon enough. What he didn't know was that Charles Bennett was already making calls, setting things in motion that would change the Johnson family's life forever. But that part of the story was still to come, and for now, Marcus drifted off to sleep, dreaming of polished shoes and answered prayers. Charles Bennett sat in his office on the 42nd floor of Bennett Technologies, studying the notes Ms. Carter had compiled about the Johnson family. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow on his desk as he read through the details of their situation. Grace Johnson had been working at Chicago General Hospital for 8 years. Her employee records showed she was always on time, often picked up extra shifts, and was well-liked by both patients and staff. She had been raising Marcus and Lisa alone since her husband's death 3 years ago in a construction accident. The insurance payout had been minimal, barely covering the funeral costs. Miss Carter, Bennett called through the intercom. Could you come in here, please? His assistant entered promptly, tablet in hand. Yes, Mr. Bennett. What did you find out about Lisa's condition? Miss Carter swiped through her notes. She has a congenital heart defect that's getting worse. The surgery she needs costs $175,000. Their insurance will only cover about 20% of that. Mrs. Johnson has been trying to get loans, but her credit isn't strong enough for the amount they need. Bennett nodded, thinking about Marcus standing in the rain, shining shoes to help his sister. And what about Marcus's school records? He wasn't a student until about 2 months ago, right when he started his shoe-shining business. His grades have slipped to CS and DS, but his teachers note that he's still trying hard, just seems very tired in class. Bennett stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city streets below. Somewhere down there, a 12-year-old boy was sacrificing his education and his childhood to save his sister. Have you verified everything with the hospital? He asked. Yes, sir. I spoke with Dr. Samantha Brown, Lisa's cardiologist. She says Lisa's condition is deteriorating faster than expected. They need to do the surgery within the next month for the best chance of success. Bennett turned back to his desk and picked up a framed photo of himself at 12 years old, shining shoes on a street corner in Detroit. Set up a meeting with our foundation's board for this afternoon and call Dr. Brown. I want to discuss Lisa's case personally. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Bennett attended back-to-back meetings, but his mind kept returning to the Johnson family. He had grown up poor himself, losing his mother to a treatable illness because they couldn't afford proper medical care. He had sworn then that if he ever had the means, he would help others avoid the same fate. By late afternoon, Bennett had spoken with Dr. Brown, who confirmed the urgency of Lisa's situation. The doctor had described Lisa as a bright, brave little girl who never complained, even when in pain. She spent her hospital days reading fairy tales and encouraging other sick children, telling them everything would be okay. Bennett's foundation board had unanimously approved his proposal to help the Johnsons. Now came the delicate part, approaching Grace Johnson in a way that wouldn't hurt her pride or make her feel like a charity case. On Saturday morning, Bennett asked his driver to take him to Chicago General Hospital. He waited in his car, watching as hospital staff came and went during shift changes. Finally, he spotted Grace Johnson leaving the building, looking exhausted after her 12-hour shift. She was a small woman with kind eyes, wearing scrubs that had seen better days. Despite her obvious fatigue, she walked with determination, probably hurrying home to her children. Bennett watched her catch the bus, making note of which route she took. Later that day, Miss Carter presented him with more findings. The Johnsons lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a struggling neighborhood. Grace Johnson spent every free moment either at the hospital with Lisa or working extra shifts to try to save money. The neighbors spoke highly of the family, mentioning how Marcus had stepped up to help his mother after his father's death. "Sir," Miss Carter said, looking up from her tablet, "there's something else you should know. I talked to Mr. Peters at the hardware store near their home. He's the one who helped Marcus build his shoe shining box. He says Marcus comes by every few days to buy supplies, always counting his money carefully and never wasting a penny." Bennett smiled, remembering how carefully Marcus had treated his expensive shoes. "That boy has an entrepreneurial spirit," he said. "He just needs a chance to develop it properly, without the weight of the world on his shoulders." As Sunday approached, Bennett made final preparations for his meeting with the Johnson family. He had his legal team draw up the necessary paperwork to cover Lisa's medical expenses through his foundation. But he had something else in mind too, a plan to ensure Marcus wouldn't have to sacrifice his education and future. Saturday night, Bennett couldn't sleep. He stood at his penthouse window, looking out over the city lights. Tomorrow, he would have the chance to change a family's life, just as someone had once changed his. He remembered the day a customer had noticed his potential and helped him get an education. Now it was his turn to pass that gift forward. Miss Carter had arranged everything perfectly. The hospital was ready to schedule Lisa's surgery as soon as the paperwork was signed. But Bennett knew that simply paying for the surgery wasn't enough. The family would need support during Lisa's recovery, and Marcus needed guidance to get his education back on track. He picked up the folder containing tomorrow's paperwork, reading through it one more time. In addition to covering Lisa's medical expenses, it included a scholarship fund for both Johnson children and a stipend to allow Grace to take time off work during Lisa's recovery. Bennett also had a special surprise planned for Marcus, an invitation to join his foundation's youth mentorship program, where he would learn about business and entrepreneurship from successful professionals. The boy had already shown he had the drive and determination to succeed. He just needed the right opportunities. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. Bennett dressed casually, wanting to put the family at ease. As his driver headed toward their neighborhood, he thought about how different his life might have been if no one had ever given him a chance. Miss Carter had done her job well. Every detail checked out, the family's need was genuine, their character impeccable, and their situation dire. Now it was time to help them, not with a handout, but with an opportunity for a better future. As they pulled up to the Johnsons' apartment building, Bennett saw Marcus waiting outside. The boy's face lit up with recognition, but there was worry in his eyes too. Bennett understood. Marcus was about to face his mother with the truth about his after-school activities. But Bennett knew something Marcus didn't. Sometimes the hardest moments in life led to the biggest breakthroughs. As he stepped out of the car, carrying the folder that would change the Johnsons' lives, he smiled at Marcus reassuringly. Today was going to be a day the Johnson family would never forget. What Marcus couldn't know was that his simple act of shining shoes in the rain had touched something in Bennett's heart, reminding him of his own past and the importance of helping others. In trying to save his sister, Marcus had unknowingly set in motion events that would transform not just Lisa's life, but the future of his entire family. Marcus stood nervously beside Charles Bennett at the door of his family's apartment. His hands were shaking as he turned the key in the lock. Inside, he could hear his mother moving around, probably wondering why he had asked her to stay home this Sunday afternoon. "Mom?" Marcus called out as they entered. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." Grace Johnson emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She stopped short when she saw Bennett and Miss Carter standing in her living room. Marcus watched as confusion crossed her face. "Mrs. Johnson." Bennett stepped forward, extending his hand. "I'm Charles Bennett, and this is my assistant, Miss Carter. Your son Marcus and I have become acquainted recently." Grace shook his hand automatically, looking between Bennett and Marcus with growing concern. "I don't understand. Marcus, what's going on?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Mom, you better sit down. I need to tell you something." They'd all sat in the small living room. Grace in her favorite worn armchair, Marcus perched on the edge of the sofa beside Bennett, while Miss Carter took the wooden chair from the dining table. "Mom," Marcus began, his voice trembling slightly, "for the past 2 months, I haven't been staying late at school for study group. I've been working." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his carefully saved money. "I've been shining shoes downtown." Grace's eyes widened as Marcus placed the money on the coffee table. Marcus, what? Why would you? It's for Lisa, Marcus said quickly, tears forming in his eyes. I wanted to help pay for her surgery. I've saved $384.75 so far. I know it's not much, but I had to do something. Grace covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her face. Oh, Marcus. Bennett leaned forward gently. Mrs. Johnson, your son has shown remarkable character and dedication. That's why I'm here today. I'd like to help. Grace wiped her eyes, looking at Bennett suspiciously. Help? How? I run Bennett Technologies, he explained, and we have a charitable foundation. After meeting Marcus and learning about Lisa's situation, I've had my team look into ways we can assist your family. Ms. Carter opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. The Bennett Foundation would like to cover all expenses for Lisa's surgery and post-operative care. Grace sat very still, her hands clutched tightly in her lap. All of it? She whispered. Yes, Bennett nodded. We've already spoken with Dr. Brown at the hospital. She says Lisa can be scheduled for surgery next week if you agree. Marcus watched his mother's face, seeing hope battle with pride. Mom, he said softly, please let them help, for Lisa. Grace looked at her son, then back at Bennett. Why? Why would you do this for us? Bennett smiled, pulling out his wallet and removing an old, worn photo. He handed it to Grace. Because 30 years ago, I was a 12-year-old boy shining shoes to help my sick mother. Someone gave me a chance then. Now it's my turn to help another family. Grace studied the photo, then looked at Bennett with new understanding. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Bennett suggested gently. Let us help Lisa, but that's not all we'd like to do. He nodded to Ms. Carter, who pulled out more papers. We're also establishing education funds for both Lisa and Marcus, Ms. Carter explained. And we'd like to provide a stipend so you can take time off work during Lisa's recovery. Grace began crying again, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. Marcus moved to sit on the arm of her chair, putting his arm around her shoulders. There's one more thing, Bennett said, turning to Marcus. I run a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs. I'd like you to join it. You've shown incredible business sense and dedication, skills that shouldn't go to waste. Marcus's eyes lit up. Really? You mean I could learn how to run a real business? Bennett nodded. You'll have to focus on your schoolwork first. No more shoe shining. But yes, we'll teach you everything you need to know about business. For the next hour, they went through the paperwork. Miss Carter explained everything in detail, making sure Grace understood all the terms. There were no hidden conditions, no catches, just genuine help from someone who understood their struggle. As they finished signing the last document, Grace's phone rang. It was the hospital. Lisa was having a good day and asking for visitors. Would you like to come meet Lisa? Grace asked Bennett and Ms. Carter. I think she'd like to thank you herself. Marcus stood nervously beside Charles Bennett at the door of his family's apartment. His hands were shaking as he turned the key in the lock. Inside, he could hear his mother moving around, probably wondering why he had asked her to stay home this Sunday afternoon. Mom, Marcus called out as they entered. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Grace Johnson emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She stopped short when she saw Bennett and Ms. Carter standing in her living room. Marcus watched as confusion crossed her face. Mrs. Johnson, Bennett stepped forward, extending his hand. I'm Charles Bennett, and this is my assistant, Ms. Carter. Your son Marcus and I have become acquainted recently. Grace shook his hand automatically, looking between Bennett and Marcus with growing concern. I don't understand. Marcus, what's going on? Marcus took a deep breath. Mom, you better sit down. I need to tell you something. They'd all sat in the small living room, Grace in her favorite worn armchair, Marcus perched on the edge of the sofa beside Bennett, while Ms. Carter took the wooden chair from the dining table. Mom, Marcus began, his voice trembling slightly. For the past 2 months, I haven't been staying late at school for study group. I've been working. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his carefully saved money. I've been shining shoes downtown. Grace's eyes widened as Marcus placed the money on the coffee table. Marcus, what? Why would you? It's for Lisa, Marcus said quickly, tears forming in his eyes. I wanted to help pay for her surgery. I've saved $384.75 so far. I know it's not much, but I had to do something. Grace covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her face. Oh, Marcus. Bennett leaned forward gently. Mrs. Johnson, your son has shown remarkable character and dedication. That's why I'm here today. I'd like to help. Grace wiped her eyes, looking at Bennett suspiciously. Help? How? I run Bennett Technologies, he explained, and we have a charitable foundation. After meeting Marcus and learning about Lisa's situation, I've had my team look into ways we can assist your family. Ms. Carter opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. The Bennett Foundation would like to cover all expenses for Lisa's surgery and post-operative care. Grace sat very still, her hands clutched tightly in her lap. All of it? She whispered. Yes, Bennett nodded. We've already spoken with Dr. Brown at the hospital. She says Lisa can be scheduled for surgery next week if you agree. Marcus watched his mother's face, seeing hope battle with pride. Mom, he said softly, please let them help, for Lisa. Grace looked at her son, then back at Bennett. Why? Why would you do this for us? Bennett smiled, pulling out his wallet and removing an old, worn photo. He handed it to Grace. Because 30 years ago, I was a 12-year-old boy shining shoes to help my sick mother. Someone gave me a chance then. Now it's my turn to help another family. Grace studied the photo, then looked at Bennett with new understanding. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Bennett suggested gently. Let us help Lisa, but that's not all we'd like to do. He nodded to Ms. Carter, who pulled out more papers. We're also establishing education funds for both Lisa and Marcus, Ms. Carter explained. And we'd like to provide a stipend so you can take time off work during Lisa's recovery. Grace began crying again, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. Marcus moved to sit on the arm of her chair, putting his arm around her shoulders. There's one more thing, Bennett said, turning to Marcus. I run a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs. I'd like you to join it. You've shown incredible business sense and dedication, skills that shouldn't go to waste. Marcus's eyes lit up. Really? You mean I could learn how to run a real business? Bennett nodded. You'll have to focus on your schoolwork first. No more shoes shining. But yes, we'll teach you everything you need to know about business. For the next hour, they went through the paperwork. Miss Carter explained everything in detail, making sure Grace understood all the terms. There were no hidden conditions, no catches, just genuine help from someone who understood their struggle. As they finished signing the last document, Grace's phone rang. It was the hospital. Lisa was having a good day and asking for visitors. Would you like to come meet Lisa? Grace asked Bennett and Ms. Carter. I think she'd like to thank you herself. They took 2 cars to the hospital. Bennett's driver took him and Ms. Carter, while Grace and Marcus rode in Ms. Carter's car. During the drive, Marcus kept looking at the signed papers in his mother's hands, hardly daring to believe this was real. When they reached Lisa's room, she was sitting up in bed, reading one of her fairy tales. Her face lit up when she saw Marcus and their mother, then turned curious at the sight of the strangers. Lisa, Marcus said, rushing to her bedside, you're not going to believe what happened. As they told Lisa about Bennett's help, her eyes grew wider and wider. When they explained that she would have her surgery next week, she started crying happy tears, just like their mother had. So I'm really going to get better? Lisa asked, looking at Bennett with hope-filled eyes. Yes, sweetheart, Bennett smiled. And when you're recovered, you and your brother can focus on school and your futures. Lisa reached for her book of fairy tales. In my stories, there are always heroes who help people in trouble. I guess they're real after all. Bennett looked at Marcus. Yes, they are. And sometimes they come in the form of little brothers who shine shoes in the rain. As they left the hospital that evening, Marcus felt like he was walking on air. His mother hugged him tightly, whispering, I'm so proud of you, even though you scared me to death with your secret job. Bennett shook Marcus's hand before getting into his car. Remember, no more shoes shining. Your job now is to study hard and come to our mentorship sessions. Deal? Deal, Marcus grinned. Watching Bennett's car drive away, Marcus thought about how much had changed in just one day. His sister was going to get her surgery. His mother wouldn't have to work herself to exhaustion anymore, and he had a chance to learn about business from a real expert. That night, as Marcus lay in bed, he could hear his mother humming in the kitchen, something she hadn't done since before his father died. Down the hall, his shoe-shining kit sat in its hiding place, no longer needed but never to be forgotten. It had been more than just a way to earn money. It had been the key to their miracle. Tomorrow, he would return to school with a lighter heart, ready to bring his grades back up. But for now, he closed his eyes, grateful that sometimes fairy tales did come true, and heroes could be found in the most unexpected places. 6 months had passed since the day Charles Bennett walked into the Johnson family's lives. The bright spring sunshine streamed through the windows of Bennett Technologies Youth Center as Marcus stood in front of a small crowd, preparing to present his first business proposal. Lisa sat in the front row, her cheeks rosy with health, smiling encouragingly at her brother. The surgery had been a complete success, and after 3 months of recovery, she was back to being an energetic 8-year-old. Their mother Grace sat beside her, looking years younger now that the weight of worry had lifted from her shoulders. Today, Marcus began, his voice steady despite his nerves. I want to talk about my plan to help other kids like me and Lisa. The audience, made up of Bennett Foundation members, fellow students from the mentorship program, and potential investors, listened attentively as Marcus explained his idea. He wanted to create a program that would help families navigate the complex world of medical care and financial assistance. When my sister was sick, we didn't know where to turn, Marcus explained, clicking to the next slide in his presentation. My mom worked extra shifts and I shined shoes, but it wasn't enough. There are probably many other families out there just like us. Bennett watched from the back of the room, smiling proudly. Over the past 6 months, he had watched Marcus transform from a desperate young shoe shiner into a confident young entrepreneur. The boy's grades had returned to straight A's, and he never missed a mentorship session. Marcus's project, which he called Helping Hands, would connect struggling families with resources, donors, and support services. He had already worked with the Foundation's legal team to create a basic framework. The best part, Marcus said, reaching the end of his presentation, is that we'll train other kids like me to help run the program. They can earn money while learning business skills, just like I did in Mr. Bennett's mentorship program. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Several Foundation board members were already taking notes, and Miss Carter was beaming from her seat near Bennett. After the presentation, as people mingled and enjoyed refreshments, Lisa tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "You're amazing, big brother," she said, hugging him tightly. "Just like a real businessman." Grace wrapped both her children in a hug. "I'm so proud of you, Marcus. You've turned something that started from worry and fear into a way to help others." Bennett approached the family, carrying a small gift-wrapped package. "Excellent presentation, Marcus. I think you've convinced quite a few people to support your project." He handed Marcus the package, a small graduation gift. Marcus carefully opened it to find a beautiful wooden shoeshine box, much fancier than his old one. Inside was a complete set of professional-grade supplies and a brass plaque that read, "Never forget where you started, CB." "Thank you, sir," Marcus said, running his fingers over the smooth wood. "I'll keep it in my office when I have one." Speaking of offices, Bennett smiled. "The board has approved funding for Helping Hands. We'd like you to run it, with supervision, of course, as part of your continued training." Marcus's eyes widened. "Really? My own program?" "You'll need to balance it with school," Bennett cautioned. "But yes, you've shown us you have both the business sense and the heart to make it work." Later that evening, the Johnsons hosted a small celebration dinner in their new apartment, one of the changes Bennett's help had brought. Grace had been able to find a better-paying job as a medical coordinator at the hospital, using skills she learned through the Foundation's adult education program. As they sat around the table eating Grace's special lasagna, Lisa asked, "Marcus, do you miss shining shoes?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Sometimes, not the work itself, but the feeling that I was doing something to help. That's why I'm excited about Helping Hands. It's a better way to make a difference." "You already made a difference," Lisa said quietly. "You helped save my life." Grace reached across the table and squeezed Marcus's hand. "You never gave up, even when things seemed impossible. Your father would be so proud of you." After dinner, Marcus went to his room and opened his laptop to work on the details for Helping Hands. His old shoe shine kit sat in a place of honor on a shelf, a reminder of where his journey began. Beside it stood his new box from Bennett, representing where he was headed. On his desk lay a newspaper article about his presentation, headlined "Former Shoe Shine Boy Launches Program to Help Struggling Families." Marcus smiled, remembering how nervous he'd been 6 months ago, setting up his shoe shine box on that busy street corner. The next morning, as Marcus walked to school, he passed the corner where he used to shine shoes. A new boy had taken his place, carefully polishing a businessman's shoes. Marcus paused for a moment, then walked over. "Hey," he said, pulling out one of his new business cards. "I like your setup. When you have a minute, I'd love to talk to you about an opportunity." The boy looked up curiously, and Marcus saw in his eyes the same determination he'd once felt. He knew that somewhere out there, this boy had his own Lisa, his own reason for working so hard. And now, thanks to everything he'd learned, Marcus could help him find a better way. As Marcus continued to school, he thought about how much could change in 6 months. He'd gone from shining shoes in the rain to running his own program. Lisa had gone from a hospital bed to running around the playground. Their mother had gone from endless worry to proud smiles. But most importantly, he learned that sometimes the hardest challenges led to the most amazing opportunities. His shoe shine box had been more than just a tool for earning money. It had been the first step on a path to helping others, just like Bennett had helped him. That afternoon, at his regular mentorship session, Marcus would begin interviewing other kids for helping hands. Some would be like him, working to help their families. Others would be like Lisa, recovering from their own health battles. All of them would have stories to tell and dreams to pursue. And Marcus would be there to help them, just as Bennett had helped him. Because sometimes the best endings aren't really endings at all, they're just new beginnings in disguise. As the spring sunlight warmed the city streets, Marcus smiled, knowing that his journey had only just begun. From a shoe shine boy to a young entrepreneur, he had learned the most important lesson of all: with determination, compassion, and a little help from others, any dream was possible.